My name is Bryce, and this is The Sex Factor, where we talk about popular TV shows and all the ways that they could be promoting safer sex, but most of the time they don't. This week on The Sex Factor, I will be talking about the CBS comedy The Big Bang Theory. This show is now the second highest rated comedy on TV and is currently in its fifth successful season. The show revolves around 5 friends living in LA. Roommates, Leonard and Sheldon, who are physicists at Caltech, Penny, who is a struggling actress/waitress that lives across the hall, and Howard and Raj, who also work at the university. The 4 scientists definitely fit the geeky and socially inept stereotype, but their friendship with the beautiful and popular Penny helps to bring them back down to earth and keep the audience laughing all the while. Ever since Penny moved in, Leonard has been obsessed with the possibility of them being together, which eventually happens at the end of the first season, and then they date on again, off again throughout the other seasons. Penny and Leonard's relationship, whether they're sleeping together or both want to be sleeping together but aren't, is one of the main features of the show. Not to say that they are the only romantic element of this comedy. In addition to the many girls, both imaginary and real, in Howard, Leonard, and Raj's sex lives, including certain fantasies with a Battlestar Galactica actress, there are also long-term love interests for these guys. In Season 3, Howard and Penny's co-worker named Bernadette start dating. Bernadette is a microbiologist working her way through grad school, and after a bumpy start, Howard and her end up dating and eventually get engaged. Even Sheldon, who comes across as nearly asexual and disgusted at the thought of sex, or coitus as he often refers to it, has a woman in his life named Amy, who is a neurobiologist. Now that we all know each other, let the sex talk begin. So when I first started watching this show, I couldn't understand why it had such high ratings. Many of the jokes were too intellectual, and Sheldon's neuroses were annoying to say the least. But then I started to see what everyone must love about this show. In addition to the characters that really are sweet and lovable people, it revolves around conversations about sex and the sexual tension among the characters. Even with all the discussions of their various jobs and problems, the main plot of each episode is usually something to do with getting a girl or dealing with the ups and downs of relationships. To further talk about this, we will be discussing an episode from the 4th season entitled The Love Car Displacement. In this episode, the group of scientists gets invited to Big Sur for a conference, and Amy invites Penny, who she considers to be her best friend, to come along for the trip. In Bernadette and Howard's car, they sing the whole drive down about being in love while Raj sits quietly in the back. Oh, I forgot to mention, Raj can't speak when women are in the room unless he is drunk or related to them, but I'll get to that later. When they finally arrive at the conference, Howard meets Bernadette's very handsome and very tall ex-boyfriend, Glenn, and he immediately feels emasculated. Back in their room, Bernadette tries to spice up their weekend, but Howard is still stuck on how inferior he feels compared to her ex. Instead of vocalizing his insecurities, Howard makes a comment about Glenn being out of Bernadette's league, and the couple starts to fight. This sets off a series of bed switching and room switching between the 7 friends, which ends up all coming out at the conference's panel discussion the next day. In the midst of all of the bed and room switching, Penny is forced to sleep in Leonard and Sheldon's room, which leads to more of that sexual tension that the show is known for. When Penny gets into bed with Leonard, she makes it clear that they will not be having sex, but he continues to make suggestions of intimate things they could do that might not technically be considered sex. Sheldon hears them negotiating the sleeping arrangements and gets up to make sure that they will not be having coitus in the bed next to him. Penny assures him that they won't be, but Leonard jokingly says that he can't make any promises, and Sheldon removes himself from the room. Now this is where I had my first knee-jerk sex educator reaction, because Penny saying no, clearly and multiple times, should have been enough for the sexual advances to stop, but living in the culture we do, seeing coercion among partners on TV is not new. But after having the whole back and forth between the former couple, to have the scene end with Leonard once again ignoring Penny's obvious lack of consent made me mad. The scene could have been just as funny if the writers had chosen to focus on Sheldon's lack of comfort with Penny sleeping there, or Leonard's unrelenting crush on her, without going anywhere near joking about sexual assault. Later on in the episode, when Penny and Leonard are left alone in the room, they get to talking about their past relationship and how they've both grown from it. As they're reminiscing, Penny decides that maybe it would be fun to have one night of sex with an ex, and Leonard is all too eager to jump into bed with her when he gets the green light to do so. They get interrupted by Raj before anything can happen, but I wanted to see how the show was going to handle the fact that neither of them probably had a condom due to the impromptu sex and musical rooms. In past shows, the characters have definitely mentioned condom use and talked about having condoms on them, even though it was mostly coming from Howard, who considers himself a ladies' man, even after striking out with most of the women he flirts with. Regardless, the show gets definite points for talking about safer sex practices and condoms. During the conference, all the tensions from the night before surface as Howard makes comments about Bernadette's past sexual partners. Bernadette makes no apologies and reaffirms how desirable she is. Leonard yells at Raj for ruining his opportunity to get back together with Penny. She yells out from the audience that she just wanted to have sex, not get back together, and Raj pokes fun at Howard's size and undesirability as he drinks yet another mimosa. Since they're all scientists, they definitely could have had at least one of them point out that penis size, which they all seem to be focused on, has nothing to do with a man's height and also nothing to do with how good of a lover he is. All in all, the show does a pretty good job of having the characters talk about condom use or at least being prepared for safer sex if the opportunity arises. The dynamics between Leonard and Penny could definitely be less stereotypical because when the show's creators are not focusing on the nerd who is hopelessly in love with the beautiful girl who doesn't think she's educated enough for him, the audience is really able to see all the ways that their characters are compatible and sweet to each other. They also have many plots where Howard feels emasculated in his relationship, including this episode and later in the season when Bernadette gets her PhD. Even though Howard has his moments of not knowing how to deal, they work through it, and it is definitely refreshing to see couples on TV where the female has a higher social and financial status and her partner does not dwell on it or make her feel guilty about her success. My last note about the show is that with Raj's quote-unquote condition, where he can only speak to women if he's intoxicated, it makes every sexual encounter he has need to be when he's under the influence, and thus might not be as proficient with his contraceptive measures. Many studies have shown that people are less likely to use condoms when under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which makes me worried about Raj's sexual health. I look forward to seeing how Penny and Leonard's relationship will unfold, if Howard and Bernadette can make it to the altar, and hopefully Raj engaging in some safe sex with his partners.